Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Nation's Call podcast with Jonna and Alyssa. Here we talk about stories from the missions field, how our theology has been changed by being with the broken and various cultures, along with other missions reflections. We hope we can uplift and inspire you with our stories and musings. Thank you for listening. And today we are going to be talking about the wrong reasons to go into missions.
Yeah, so this is stuff that we've seen on our trips, stuff that we've said ourselves.
Stuff we've totally done.
Whoops. So if I asked you, why are you here, your first trip to Romania, what would you have told me?
Oh, because God had something here for me.
Uh-huh.
Wrong reason.
All right, tell us why God had something here for me is the wrong reason.
So, that is I don't want to use the word selfish, but it really is all about yourself when you say phrases like that. It does not leave room for anybody else to be there. Like, if I said this in front of a church, which I'm pretty sure I did, it does not leave room for the congregation to be there and, like, be present in your why. And so
it's not like God had something for me to give you.
Right.
It's like God has something for me and I came to get it.
Yes, and so it's purely, like, self-interested, which, real talk, that did a number on me. Like, my first missions trip, let's be honest here, since my reasoning was God had something for me, and I felt like I never got it, I came home absolutely depressed.
That's really sad.
Yeah, I felt like nothing happened. I felt like I was depressed. I was not.
What's the point of missions?
Yeah, I was.
A little bit?
Yeah. I did not feel fulfilled in doing what I felt like God led me to do, and how I saw all of these things work out in place, and yet I didn't feel like God did anything. So I had a mental breakdown straight up on the trip. Because
during your trip?
During the trip. Like, we were leaving the next day, and I had a mental breakdown about how God didn't even do any of these prophetic words that were spoken to me.
So this is just, I'm trying to set the stage here.
Yeah, you're good.
You're just, like, sitting in the mission house?
Yes.
By yourself in a dark room?
Yes.
Just, like, blanket over your head?
Basically.
Just, like, deep in depression.
Deep in depression.
Dark clouds swirling.
I was crying. My missions leader came in and she was trying to encourage me, and I just kind of responded with, I have all of these prophetic words that God has given me about Romania, and I didn't see one of them happen. And I was depressed, because as much as I love prophetic words are gratification of whoever gets them. Like, it's a good thing.
And also maybe the timeline, you know?
Right.
You've been back to Romania like 6 times since then.
And coming back and really praying about it, God did tell me, like, you know, I have to get used to Romania, and Romania has to get used to me before most of these words can ever even think about happening, which is fine. Like, I'm fine with that. I have peace about it. But because my reasoning for going was for myself, it ruined the trip for myself.
And probably for some of the people you're trying to minister to.
And probably the people I ministered to. Because even if you don't say the reasoning, you can feel the reasoning.
Yeah.
So, after that trip, the next time I went, I still had my pack of prophetic words. But
you actually brought them with you?
I brought them with me on every trip, I think. I still had my pack of prophetic words, but I went with, I'm not expecting anything to happen.
Which is also not great
place
to be in.
I don't know. I'm still like that. Like, I don't want to expect all of this stuff to happen for me.
Oh, you're just like, I'll accept it if it does.
I'll accept it if it does, but I don't want to go out and be like, yeah, for sure, this is going to happen. Like, maybe that's like anti-faith, but I want God to move, and whatever he moves, I will flow with him and do that, but I don't want to be like, yeah, for sure, this is this word right here, this one, it's gonna happen.
Yeah. I've heard, like, the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is, like, surety, or, like, like an unbreaking, like, this is gonna happen. Because, like, that breaks you more than having, like, mixing your faith and expectancy with some doubts. Like,
right.
It's like, yeah, because God will move. whether or not we're planning for him to, or whether or not we're like telling him to do this certain thing.
Or if we're like leaving room for him.
Yeah, I feel like for me, faith in missions is kind of like, I'm going to keep an eye out. When I see God do something, I'm going to say, hey, that's God, and I'm going to like honor that and respect it and work
flow
with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think leaving room for him to move is also a big thing. Because what's been really cool is since we have been a very small number team.
Which at sometimes has been just the two of us.
Yes. Which
comes with its own blessings, honestly.
Honestly, I kind of love it. So, like, as much as I want to lead big teams and stuff, because, like, you haven't gone with a big team.
I'm not prepared to comfort people who are having mental breakdowns quite yet. Like, I'm just trying to think of, like, me being a missions leader. Like, if I had someone on my team that was, like, having a mental breakdown the way you were, I'm not sure that I would know how to deal with that quite yet.
I am the problem child.
So in that sense, I'm really grateful that it's just been a few of us.
Right.
To get on each other's nerves enough.
I could do it, though. But you haven't been with the big team in Romania.
That's true. I've been around them, but I've not been part of it.
Right. So it's completely different. So being a part of a team in Romania, like a 10-person team, you have a schedule. Wild!
What's that?
So you have a schedule of like, okay, you wake up at this time and you get breakfast and here's Bible time. And then like after that we go do blah, 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 XYZ. And then like you have it for the whole week. Every day. You actually know what you're doing.
So sitting in the cherry tree and throwing cherries at Cornell is not part of the schedule?
Yeah, it's not part of the schedule. It's different. But being by yourself, it's like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing today. Oh, this person needs help with XYZ. All right, cool. That's what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
Like,
or sitting in fruit trees.
Or sitting in fruit trees.
Like, just like...
or doing 14 loads of laundry.
I don't want to talk about how many fruit trees I've climbed and then accidentally, quote unquote, fallen out of.
It's like 2 feet. Anyway.
So my reasoning when I went to missions, which my first missions trip was Dominican Republic, not Romania.
My reasoning for Dominican Republic was, this is a school credit.
Yeah, honestly. Well, my primary reasoning was I'm going because I have to. Because I need to finish my degree. My secondary reasoning was I want to go on missions because I wanted to be a missionary when I was like 4 years old. This is what I told my mom that I was going to do. And I feel like I kind of had one of those like a little bit of like a holier than thou complex, but like not really. My reasoning was I felt called to come because I want to be closer to God. Mm-hmm. Like that was my primary goal, was like I just want to be closer to God. And that's great, but I also could have totally been closer to God at home.
I don't know. There's times where I definitely feel closer to God on the field than I do here.
Yeah.
However, while that is a good benefit that you will also come across in missions, that is not a good reasoning.
It's a benefit.
It's a benefit. It's not a reasoning, though.
Yeah.
Just by Googling a quick search, you can see a ton of different reasons to go into missions.
I think one of the most common ones that I've seen is actually traveling. It's like, oh, it's good for you because you get to travel and go on a vacation.
Y'all can't see me, but I'm making faces.
I'm like, missions isn't a vacation. It's ministry. And I mean, it's nice and you do get vacation days, but that's not really the purpose.
Right. I okay, I love to travel. I love visiting other countries. I like missioning in other countries more than I like traveling in other countries. Because when I travel, I stay at like really nice place and I'm like separated from the culture and separated from the people.
Yeah.
Versus
missions is like up close and personal and you get to meet people and really like immerse yourself.
Yeah, I'm staying at these people's houses that I've met or talked to like once, and I am trying to grasp the language and overall struggling, but I like it better because I can grasp the culture better, I can learn better. And the problem with the quick search of how to get or why to get into missions is a lot of the reasonings they give is more of reasonings for travel.
Yeah, or like self-centered reasons like, oh, it's good for your personal relationship with God.
Right.
Which, that's true, it is, and it's definitely a perk, but it's not a good
first reason.
core motivating reason to do ministry at all. It's
Yeah.
like, I want to see what God will do for me.
Right?
Like that's
kind
not
of-
good.
This past time we were in Romania, we attended church, and there was a new missions team that we helped prepare for, and a couple of them were asked to tell the congregation why they decided to come to Romania. And
It's a lot of a flashback to us.
it was a flashback to us. And it was, I came here because I feel like God has something for me here. Or I came here because I want to be closer to God. Or something very like me oriented. And maybe it was different because I wasn't a part of this team and I was sitting in the congregation. But you know how you sit with a group of people and you kind of feel what everyone else is feeling? I had this feeling of there's no room for me in it. Like, you didn't come for me. You didn't come for us. You didn't come for Romania. You came for yourself. And I felt that really strong, and it really bothered me. And it really was a flashback to what I said my first year. And, you know, repenting of saying these things, but also wanting to help others
Not say them?
not say them, like realize that that's probably a bad reasoning. And while I do feel like God does call you places because he does have something for you, and I do feel like what they're saying is not wrong, I also feel strongly that that cannot be the first and foremost only reasoning of going. Because I think a lot of people confuse missions and like the benefits of missions and the reasonings for missions and the reasonings and benefits for travel as the same thing, because I mean, when you mission, you usually do travel. I mean, you can mission in your hometown, in your backyard, yes, but like you usually mission by traveling.
That's usually called outreach and not missions, though.
Yeah, but I usually hear people being like, here's a sign. This starts your mission field in your church. You know,
that's
like
true.
I'm used to people being like, you can mission in your anyway.
So like the more that you realize that people are hurting and they kind of expect you to come and help them to stop hurting so much.
Yeah.
And then they hear you talking about yourself
Yes.
and they hurt again.
It's like
It
deflating.
solidifies the fact that no one's thinking about them.
Yeah, and it's deflating the balloon. You know, like I could feel in that congregation, I could feel these hopes of like,
Finally, someone's here to help me.
this one will help. And then just,
Yeah.
never mind. And it's depressing. And maybe that's just how I took it. That could be, maybe that's not really what was being felt, but that's kind of how I felt the congregation react was.
Yeah, it was kind of visible. Like you could see like shoulders hunch a little more and like.
Yeah. So it adds more fuel to the fire that we're already trying to put out.
Yeah.
And like your whole point is to put out this fire, but telling a congregation, I came here for me, just adds more fuel. It shows them that they're not worthy to be thought about.
Been doing some.
So, and nobody on stage could notice, but like those that were in the audience saw this hope just
kind of shatter.
diminish. Yeah. And so ever since then, we've been thinking about, oh, that's something to be corrected for ourselves.
And when we bring teams, we want to help and not hurt, you know?
And like kind of bring to light, like, hey, this is only for you and not for the person in front of you. We should pray and think about that one.
Right. A lot of my personal motivations for going into missions comes from like Heidi Baker and her ministry in Africa and specifically in Mozambique. She talks a lot about helping and loving the one in front of you, like loving the one in front of you specifically, and like paying attention to individual people, hearing their stories and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, just seeing that, come for me.
I know. Yeah. And I
did this for me.
And it kind of goes into this whole idea where we were researching it, and we came across, it was an article that was explaining missiology.
It's the study of missions.
Yeah, we were studying missiology, and it came across that short-term missions is a relevantly new thing, and it was built on the foundation that you need to do this for your relationship with God.
Yeah. In
So-
the 70s through the 90s, that was the core reason that people went on short-term missions trips at all,
Was
their
very-
personal relationship with God.
a self-centric reasoning, and it just feels like people that they went to probably picked up on it. You pick up on the reasonings people are there. You can tell if they're there for you or if they're there for them.
I mean, intentionality is really everything when it comes to missions.
Right.
Because how can you minister to someone? How can you talk about Jesus or even think about, changing someone's religion?
Right.
How can you evangelize anyone if you,
Are about a numbers game.
if you just think, oh, I'm here for me and this is about my personal experience with God and I'm not actually here for you.
And you're counting on your fingers like, all right, I got
How many people did you get saved this
5
time?
people saved today. Woo!
And then
But
what
then
happens to those people?
do you remember their names?
No.
Like do you remember who they are? Do you remember their street? Do you have a way to make sure they're connected and plugged into the local church?
Right? And there's no way to actually continue a relationship with that person.
Right. Like,
And I think our relationships with people in missions is very connected to their relationship with God.
right.
Because if you lead someone to Jesus, then they kind of found God through their relationship with you. So
Right.
then you break off that connection. What's to say that their connection with Jesus is going to stand?
Right. Like, you have to be able to have a way to connect them into the local church. Like, our missions in Dominican Republic, that was a week-long short trip. And every time somebody got saved, I made sure to tell them, like, go to this church. Like, make sure you get connected.
Right.
This is our translator. He will help you. Like, I made sure that they had a connection.
To people that are staying in the country and doing stuff. Yeah.
Right.
So, you took an art history class
yeah.
a couple semesters ago.
Oh, man.
And how did that affect the way that you saw missions?
I cried. I took an art history class over Africa, Oceania, and the Americas. And that was like required. I either took that class or I took Art of Asia, which I took both because I wanted a very well-rounded art history
You minored in art
education.
history.
Yeah, I wanted a very well-rounded art history education. I minored in it. And that class was difficult, to say the least, because Oceania and Africa, like, they were missioned to and it was brought up. Like, that was not something that was negated because it is history, even though it's studying it through art. Like,
Right. It changed the culture so much that you have to talk about the impact of missions.
Yeah.
Because you need to talk about what it did to the
right.
culture.
So, like, when we talked about Africa, we talked about how, like, Christianity was missioned there and they refused to teach them writing. And then Islam was missioned there and they taught them how to read and write, which is why that basically is, like, what took over Africa, is because that they taught them education. Like, they were effective. They taught them how to...
Christian missionaries didn't teach them any useful practical skills.
They refused.
But Muslim missionaries did.
Yes. Yeah, so, like, it stayed with them of, like, it gave me something. They taught me how to fish,
Yeah.
where Christian missionaries just gave them a fish. They gave them something more that they could embellish on. And so that really changed Africa. But for Oceania and the Americas, like, oh man, my heart broke. There was a period where I left class in tears and nobody noticed because I'm really good at hiding it when I feel like it.
Sunglasses at school.
Sunglasses are awesome. But, like, for the Americas, we were talking about South America. And just picture this. It's like 1500s, and the people there are weaving by hand.
Wow.
14,000 thread count.
That's like, I'll never own 14,000 thread count sheets. Do we even know how to do that?
By
machine?
We just now figured out how to do that by machine
That's insane.
in the past 10 years.
Hand.
In the past 10 years, we just figured it out. So they were doing this by hand 500, 600, 700 years ago.
Like, not that long ago,
like,
when you look at world history.
Right, but, like, also long ago when you look up machines. Like,
Right, yeah.
And we just now figuring it out. And the Christian missionaries, the Spanish Inquisition, was like, no, you can only weave Christian things. Because their tradition was to weave their idols. And
like, the stories of their idols, it was very,
right.
like, religion.
They're religion-based. And so I'm like, okay, like, I get that. I can see people saying that currently in our day and age. I understand. But they got so mad that they kept weaving their idols and their religions because they weren't missioning effectively. Like, their lives were not being changed to God. It was just lives were being changed to rules. And they got so mad that they forbade weaving. They forgot how to weave. Like, to this day, the people there don't know the tradition of weaving.
Oh, man. So,
this technology...
No more 14,000 count.
This technology by hand, lost. Because of Christian missionaries.
And this was a huge part of their culture, too, wasn't it?
Like, huge. This was something that they passed on generations to generations. That's like basically telling somebody, like one of us, like, hey, you know that recipe?
Don't do pottery anymore.
Well, no. It's even deeper than that. It's like, hey, you know your grandmother's recipe for lasagna? Oh. That's like what you make for every potluck, what you make for every funeral and every birthday, what you make like every ceremony, every time people get together. Yeah, you're not allowed to cook. Like, period. You can't even cook lasagna. You can't cook at all.
Wow.
That's like how in depth that is. And
you
so
just rip away just centuries of tradition.
Yep.
In the name of God and missions.
Yeah, in the name of God and missions. And so I remember...
Do you feel like that changed anything? Like, do you feel like that people, you know, that was effective for people getting saved at all?
No, it doesn't...
I don't think...
I mean, given, like, I wasn't studying missiology at this point, I was studying history. History-wise, it didn't... I mean, I could be wrong.
Culture and
I could be wrong, but what it looks like is it stripped culture. It didn't glorify. And the thing is, like, God isn't... Jesus isn't American. Like, we form our religion into our Christian nationalism, which there's, you know, things. But the thing is, we keep saying we adopt to the Bible, but we're really adopting the Bible to us.
Yeah. Or
so
like
taking
our personal culture and saying that what you have to do to become a Christian is also become culturally like me.
Yeah.
And that's really not good theology.
No, it's not good.
And it's not loving.
No, it's not. Well. It's not loving your neighbor at all. And especially when you realize that that's what you're doing. You're stripping a whole identity that God has been wonderful in giving us that diversity. That's like saying you can't speak in your mother tongue. How hard? If you
took me out of English and put me in Romanian and was like, here you go.
Right. Without translators. Yeah, so like imagine this, my dear listeners. We love you. But imagine, you know, you speak English. I'm assuming that's your first language, but I'm very much assuming.
Considering the fact that this is right now a very small mom and pop podcast.
Yeah.
We really only know.
This is our first podcast. So we're assuming that English is your first language. All right. So
if it's not, we're sorry.
If it's not, imagine this is your mother tongue. But like imagine being dropped into a different country. Let's not even say Romania, because maybe Romanians are listening to this. Let's say some Sri Lanka. Let's say you're dropped into Sri Lanka, and if you're from Sri Lanka, imagine somewhere else. But let's say you're dropped into Sri Lanka, and you're told, okay, you're no longer allowed to speak English. You're only allowed to speak their local dialect.
Or language, yeah.
Yeah, like...
It's like, what are you supposed to do?
That strips, like, and the way languages work, the languages speak for your culture as well, because it's the way we form sentences. But that's, like, stripping.
Of the culture, yeah.
Yeah.
I found a statistic online about missions. Woo, statistics!
Yay!
Which is wild, because it's really hard to find statistics about missions. From Baylor University Education, they said that an estimated $2 billion per year is spent on missions. $2 billion is a lot of money.
That's awesome.
And I almost guarantee you that half of that goes to plane tickets.
Right, half that goes to plane tickets. Which, like, is awesome. Like, I love that. But also
just like, makes you, like, want to be really sure.
It makes me want to be really sure of people going for the right reasons. Or, like, not just... Okay, so when I was in high school, one of my friends from church went on a mission trip to China. And
Which sounds really cool and also somewhat dangerous.
I know this person, and yeah. And so when he came back and he's like, everybody needs to go on a mission trip. That was awesome. Blah, blah. And while I agree, like, I do think if you're going to be worth your salt, you should go on a mission trip at least sometime in your life. And it doesn't have to be, like, far out. It could literally just be, like, 2 hours away. But, like, I think you always have to go with the right reasoning. And honestly, I've seen some people say that you should missions because you can travel. That
has been something I've heard people say.
That was their number one reason, was you should mission because you can travel. And I've even thought that before because I love traveling and I felt like so benefited from being able to travel, where I was like, I love this. I love missioning. I love traveling. This is great. Yeah, really, 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 really.
And it's really easy to love missions because you love travel.
Yes, and it's really bad reasoning. Really bad. Really, really bad.
So recently we started reading this book called Helping Without Hurting in Short-Term Missions. And it really said a lot of things that we've been thinking as far as missions goes. Jonna, you're farther in the book than I am, I think. So would you like to talk about your experiences reading it?
I feel like I'm like, look at this! Read it! But, okay, so he said this thing, and it felt like something that I've been thinking without realizing the words for.
Yeah.
But he said this thing, I'm going to paraphrase it, but basically, how can you help and hurt? Giving food and clothing to a child does not give any dignity to the father.
Who can't provide for his kids.
Right. And I'm like, yeah, that's been something I've been thinking about, is like, yes, giving food to the hungry is wonderful, and I love doing that, and giving clothes to the people that don't have clothes, like, yes, help, like, let's do things, I like to actively do things as well as,
right.
like, counsel and prayer and blah, blah, but, like, it's not black and white. It's great. You have to be careful, because what if...
It's not dignifying to give people something they didn't ask for or didn't need.
Right.
Like, clothing and food, and those are real needs, but I think you have to also offer them things like friendship and compassion.
Right.
And listening
and
to
you don't,
where they are in their real lives.
And you can't show up with a gift, otherwise people will always expect a handout. Like, they'll always expect, not a handout,
and
but, like, people will always accept a gift. And it's more of, like, I want to come to you.
Their entire relationship with you
is based on the gift.
Is based on the fact that you need to give them something in order for you to feel good about the way you stand in friendship with them.
Right. And so it's about, you show up first.
Right, you become
to build
friends, a friend. Intentionality, loving your neighbor, and then you ask them what they need. And sometimes that will be food and clothing, and they'll have real material needs. And sometimes it's not.
And sometimes there's times where you feel like, oh, they need new clothes because, like, for example, in Romania, there was definitely this young kid who was a boy wearing a bright red shirt that said, "Puppies are a girl's best friend." And I could
Right, because it's in English.
It's in English, and so they didn't know what it said. But I could very easily be like, oh, he needs clothes because he's wearing the wrong clothes. And give them clothes, and the family would be like, you think we're poor? You think that we can't afford money? Or
away.
You can't afford clothes? And you think all these things
I'm
about
not
me?
clothing my child well enough, so you have to come in here and, like...
And you were assuming these
that
things.
You needed to clothe my child for me?
Yeah. Like,
I would be so offended. You think about that from, like, a personal perspective. If somebody came up to me and did that to me, I would be not only offended, but really saddened and, like, personally just pretty much destroyed. Like, emotionally destroyed over the fact that they see me as a project.
Right. Yeah. And so it's a thing. Or, like, for example, my sister, me and her both kind of forget to eat. Like, the eating isn't really something that we do, especially her. And so it'd be like somebody coming up and giving her a bunch of food. And while she would be grateful, she would also, like, if you were like, yeah, because I saw you weren't eating, she would also be like, you think I'm too poor to afford my own food? I just forgot to eat that day. Like,
right.
You know?
It's kind of that, like, we make assumptions based off what we think people need, and we try to provide that for them, but we don't actually ask them what they need.
Right. And, like, while the heart of it is we just want to be helpful and to be a blessing, sometimes that backfires so fast.
So badly.
Yeah.
So badly. And honestly, hospitality, some of the greatest instances of hospitality that I have seen have come from the materially poor. We've been invited into homes and given food and conversation, and like one guy, he gave you like cherries. Like he brought like a pocket full of cherries.
I love him.
And he wasn't like, you know, people. He's from the village, and he doesn't look super rich, you know.
But like, once again, that's kind of assuming.
Yeah, it's kind of assuming.
Yeah. But he's such a giver, you know. He doesn't drive a Benz. He doesn't, you know.
He rides a bicycle.
He rides a bicycle in a tank top and shorts.
Yeah.
And he tells me that I need to have kids and move to Romania. Like,
The move to Romania part seems likely.
but like,
Yeah.
he's super giving. He's giving me handfuls of cherries. He's giving me like apples and tomatoes, and like he's supplied me dinner without realizing it.
Right.
Just because he's like, oh, you're awesome. Here, let me
Yeah.
stuff your pockets full of stuff.
And that's part of what I've noticed is Romanian hospitality does have a lot to do with food and
Yes.
sharing food and having a meal together and just, you know, bringing things to the table. Like one of the first times that we really felt invited into the family community of Romania was when we went to a family cookout after a baby dedication.
Right. Like it was family only.
And I was sick during the baby dedication, so I didn't get to go.
And the baby dedication was from, like, you could tell it had Roma roots because it was super loud. And I came home and I'm like, Alyssa!
Yeah, you were like almost completely deaf, and I was like, why are you yelling?
Like, what are you saying? Baby dedication! Party for family, us! Go!
And it was great. We went and they gave us meat, and they were like, "Oh, here, have some more.
Here's another
hungry."
piece, don't break my heart.
Eat
Here, another
more.
piece. And we're just like, we're full.
Yeah, it's just like culturally, the hospitality and the bonding is really share a meal and connect.
Yes.
And I think that's pretty like common. Cross-cultural barriers is that a lot of cultures, even American culture, especially in the South, we really rely on
Food.
you know, eat the food, do the potluck, connect over the food.
Right.
And so, yeah, that was always really interesting to me, is that, you know, the materially poor will be some of the most giving.
Yeah.
And they'll give you stuff, and then you will come away with it thinking, I don't know, I just felt really changed. It changed the way that I looked at people. It changed the way I looked at missions as a material giving, serving, helpful kind of organization. Like, there's just a lot there to unpack.
So it's kind of like we have to redefine poverty, which is what Helping Without Hurting in Short-Term Missions, the book
yeah.
speaks about, is like redefining poverty is like, while we would define it as like materially lacking or like needs food, clothing, etc., needs education, blah blah, while people that are in more materially poor countries would define poverty as a lack of value
Yeah.
and like a demoralizing of self. Let's go back to the reasonings. All right, some of the reasonings we've seen defined has been listed as mission trips bring youth groups together, mission trips challenge comfort zones, mission trips empower students. Okay, we looked up this blog. We're going to try to keep it nameless, but I'm sure if you look it up, you'll find it.
Yeah, it's in the ads section, so, I mean, it's like one of the top blogs.
You'll find it. So,
Why
it was like,
this is the year to go on a missions trip.
all right.
And it's like,
Let's get excited about these reasonings. Okay?
it's 2020. No, it's 2019. All right.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So it's 2019. Get ready for a year of a ride.
Yeah.
All right. Travel costs are actually down. Listed as number 1.
Travel costs are down? That's your reason for going on a missions trip?
Your number 1 reason.
Your
Not your number
number
2 reason. Your number 1 is travel costs are down.
They're literally citing airplane gas prices for a reason why you should go on a missions trip, is because you can do it pretty cheap.
Which, like, that's a reason to travel, yo.
That's a reason to travel. It totally is.
It's a reason to travel. And I don't mean to, like, bash, like, people's reasonings, but also let's get the correct reasoning.
Right. I think also part of being a missions leader is, personally, I feel called to kind of bring attention to these bad reasons.
Gentle correction
and
of, like...
talk about it before people hit the field and have a crisis, because I had a crisis.
I too had a crisis.
And I would like for it to be possible for people to not be jet lagged and have, their crisis from home. Like, I would have loved to have my crisis in my living room.
Yeah.
Instead of
right,
literally 8-hour jet lagged.
That's what we're here for. Like, let's get your crisis out before you get on the field, and therefore your field, like, dealings will be great.
You'll be so much more prepared.
So here's the thing. I'm gonna separate these things. So reasonings for missions is about the other. Reasonings for travel is self. Like, you love to travel, you love to see new cultures, blah, blah, blah. Like, I will 100% admit, I definitely have reasons for self in my missions.
Right.
But the goal is to not let them be number one. Okay? So, I'm just going to list these off and tell you if they're travel or missions.
Travel or missions.
So, number 2, flying is only getting better.
Travel.
So, they're talking about how international flights are getting better.
Like,
they have free Wi-Fi and USB charging ports, not only games or movies, but also games and music and legitimately good food. Quote, legitimately good food and better seats.
Okay, travel reason. Let's just leave it there. And
it's travel
keep
reason.
Going.
Number 3, everyone has done the research for you. I don't get this reasoning. I've done a lot of research.
I suppose it's about, like, what to pack. It says, like, what to pack, best travel pillow. Google it. Someone already has a blog about it.
That's true.
That's
and I
a
definitely...
travel reason.
It is a travel reason. And I also, for those that do come on mission trips with us, I have a packing list for them.
And honestly, having research done for you is great. Especially,
it is nice.
For traveling. For the traveling portion that comes with missions.
Right.
But it's still travel.
Right.
It's not like a core internal motivating reason to go across the sea, spend a bunch of money.
Right.
And, help people.
Number 4, the internet. Okay, so I have mixed feelings about this because my mom is definitely like, my baby! You dedicate your child to the Lord, and you're like, yay, go missionaries! But not my baby, Lord! Not my baby! So, like,
right, your family is very, very, like, connected.
Yeah, they're very, like, what country are you in? You don't know what country you're in? I need you to tell me what country you're in. And I'm like,
close.
But I don't know.
When we went on our mission trip in 2018, you, like, chatted with your mom every night, and I, had 2 phone conversations with my mom over the 2 months we were there.
Yeah, and that
was really, really hard, and it made me really, really, like, a bad person to do missions with.
And even, like, the sole reason why there was one event where we were choosing, do we stay in this place or this place? The sole reasoning was internet. Like,
yeah.
Because I was thinking, my mom's gonna flip out if I don't tell her where I am. And I don't know where I am, but I have to tell her.
Right. Yeah.
So I have mixed feelings about the internet because, like, it does give me a big sense of security. Like, knowing that Amsterdam has citywide internet and, like, Paris has citywide internet.
That's
and
really
like,
great.
all of the big cities usually.
You can Google where you are so that you don't get lost.
You can download the Google Maps, like, map of the city you're going to. Like, I have mixed feelings about that.
symptoms that you're having and find out if they're just jet lag or if you have, like, cancer.
Yeah. Please don't medical MD this.
I have totally WebMD'd, like,
oh gosh,
my ears didn't pop after a flight.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and
Bro.
I was like, am I gonna die? And they were like, no, and I was like, cool, and then it went away.
But so the internet does not contribute, I feel like, to neither missions nor travel. I feel like that's just
fact.
the thing.
It's just a fact.
Yeah. So, number 5 is English.
Also a fact? Question mark?
Well, okay, I guess their reasoning is, like, a lot of times...
People
all right, I'm just going to say this, and you can call it controversial, whatever. But English basically kind of is the international world language.
It's becoming that way.
It's like, everywhere you go, it's in English or, like, some form. It's very rarely not in English. And even, like, countries that don't have the romanticized language, like, for example, when I volunteered in Israel, it was in Hebrew and Arabic. and English because
Yeah.
of the different language
And
structures.
even though there are languages that are bigger than English, I think it's a big language because the people who travel and do tourism the most come from English-speaking countries because there's the most money there.
Right. Which also, I'm
So-
tired of being like, oh, you're an American, you're rich.
Yeah,
Because that's not true. That's not true. I just know how to travel and travel cheaply.
Right.
Just saying.
They have no idea the quality of hostels that we've stayed in.
Honestly.
And if you come on
honestly.
a trip with us, we will be staying in a nice hotel. It'll be fine. And Jonna will
Or a
research
nice
it.
hostel. There's been
Or a
nice
nice hostel.
hostels. It's just...
We
my-
test them first. It's
We
fine.
do test them. My goal is to make it cheap and nice. That's the goal. I want
Yeah.
it to be affordable and nice. Number 6. Globalization.
That's the same thing as English, honestly.
Yeah, it is.
It's-
7. Greater self-awareness.
I mean,
I mean,
it's really just a reason for traveling, honestly. Like, I do think that missions gives you more self-awareness. It does.
I feel like it gives you even more self-awareness than traveling. But,
it comes at a cost.
I don't know.
I'm
I'm very...
personal crisis.
I know. I'm very yes. I think everybody should go on mission trip once in their life. I'm kind of I like that idea. But I like it as in the perfect, everybody
In
will
a
train,
perfect
everybody
world.
will be there for the one and kind of, because it's a perk.
Put
It's a perk.
yourself aside.
Yeah.
And
Greater
come with a heart of
self-awareness.
humility.
Greater self-awareness is a perk. But reason? Okay, you're only going to get busier.
That's reason number 8. And
I don't get that. You're always busy.
like everything.
That's not a reason. You're
They're-
always busy.
They're saying that you should do this while you're in college and have summers available. So they're saying that's literally under the reason is do this while you're in college and have
I'm making
summers available.
faces.
And yeah,
Okay.
they're take a whole year and go join a long-term team.
Okay, so basically they're saying do this before you have children, or if you want children.
I mean, I know
If you
plenty
want
of people
children,
in
do
college.
this before you have children.
I mean, it's
I do know families that go on mission trips, but it's kind of
really hard, and you can't go to places that have a lack of amenities where
Right.
you're gonna need to stay, because if you have young children, it would really be hard to take care of them and also worry about
right,
foot fungus, parasites,
etc.
anything
Right.
that comes with.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that's a reason for anything. If I'm gonna be honest, I feel like everybody is always busy all the time, and you just make time for things that you really feel like should be.
Yeah, if you
Done.
feel called for something, then you end up making time for it.
Reason number 9, God still calls us to go. And the GIF is a guy diving into the water.
Off of a really high
Off
rock.
a cliff, diving into the water.
Which I have to say, I've never done that on a mission trip.
I'm really warm and that looks great. I haven't done it on a mission trip either. I've done it while I've traveled.
Yeah. And
Okay,
they're
and
like,
while-
God's commission hasn't changed. And that's true.
That's true.
The Great Commission.
Hasn't changed.
But
But
the Great
okay.
Commission
But
is
I
about
also,
loving your neighbor, though.
I also have mixed feelings about this because I'm God calls us to go just as much as he calls us to stay. So it's kind of which is one of my quotes on our page is if you were saying he didn't really call you to go, did he specifically call you to stay? And my point is more of if he called you to stay, cool.
Yeah.
Good for you. Mission in your backyard for
Yeah, and ministry looks different all across the board.
Right.
There's pastoral ministry, teaching ministry,
Sunday school,
children's ministry, adults ministry,
teens,
the very
mission,
far
college,
underdeveloped college ministry.
right? There's people
There's
without
a lot.
homes. There's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that you could help out with in your own hometown. You don't necessarily have to get on an overseas flight that is going to exhaust you for 3 days.
I think it's almost unfair to people to say that in order to be saved or be a good Christian, you have to do missions, overseas missions.
Hold up.
And
Wait.
that's something we've run into. For
What?
real.
Repeat it again. How
That
many
in
how many
order-
pages? And hold up.
There was literally a website that we saw. And
No,
it was
there's more than one.
Oh, more than one?
There was 3.
Right.
There
That's
was
right.
3
I was
websites.
thinking of the one major one that we won't say the name of.
Well, we won't say a name of a lot of things, but
They put missions as a directive from God that is so serious and so severe that you either go on missions trips or your salvation comes into question.
There was actually, and I
Your
quote,
salvation to Jesus Christ.
and I quote, if you don't go on overseas missions, can you really call yourself a Christian? Question mark. Quote.
And I feel like that's completely unfair to people who can't go on mission trips.
I
Like
think-
mothers and fathers
And
and
you know,
people
that struggle with disabilities and
or fundraising. Like, it's just
Right.
really unfair.
it's so unfair because it is like, while I'll say money is not a reasoning, because you can always fundraise, and I'm always willing to help people, and I've seen at least $500 like pop into thin air. Like, I will also say it's definitely a privilege that I've been able to have the time and been able to see miracles happen and being able to, you know, fundraise as well as I do, because I've been
Right.
able to research and had years of like youth leading to like also
Right.
fundraise. So
And I've known of people who fundraised for a mission trip and then came up short and
Right.
couldn't go. And I feel like it's really unfair to call those people's salvation into question.
right, it's not fair. Like
And it's
that
also
that is never something that should be questioned.
really America-centric too, because
It is.
what about like
Because
Christians
noticing
from
it,
other countries? Like, are they
these-
supposed to mission to us?
right, like these came from American blogs, because we're in America and we did not have our VPN on. And you know, they were saying
Yeah.
like us Christians need to go mission to other nations, but like
It was very much the feeling of American Christians should go mission to other nations, otherwise your salvation is in question.
and so therefore I'm like, okay, but who's missioning to us? Like, okay, people say this to me a lot, and I get it. And I'm just not called to America, point blank. Like, that's just a thing. But I always do pray for people to, you know, either come to us or stay here and mission, like, you know,
Right.
mission in America, because it's important too. Like,
Right.
I'm devastated over our country just as well.
I think that's part of being the body of Christ, is that you realize what your community that you're called to is. And then you go towards that and you pray that the gaps you feel like you need to fill but can't are covered. And you pray that other people will follow the call of God and that they will have a heart of humility and grace and do the things that you see are problems but you can't get to.
Right. It's definitely the community in the body of Christ. Like, realizing, like, I am only an ear and I can only hear, but somebody needs to say something, you know, but knowing that you are not the lips, you can't say it.
Right.
And you're just praying
Yeah.
like somebody else should, you know, and noticing that. So that was,
So yeah, that whole salvation issue really bothered me on
Oh,
so
I
many
kinda-
levels, and it felt really controversial to me, and I really don't shy away from controversy. I like raising questions and asking things.
I love raising questions and asking things and having having a space, like a safe
I'm
space.
an Enneagram 8. I'll fight you about
Right?
it.
I
But
like-
with humility.
I like
I'm
having-
willing to be wrong.
I like having a safe space where we can ask questions, as long as it's like not judgment, you know. But it felt so judgy. It wasn't even asking a question. It was like, you will go to hell for not missioning. And I'm like, excuse me,
Yeah,
sir.
It was very.
But that
intent
does not
behind
sound
it.
like what Jesus said when he said, repeat after me, the salvation's prayer. I don't feel like missions was mentioned in the salvation's prayer.
No, it was kind of just like, I believe that Jesus died on the cross to save me from my sins.
Right. And like,
Hallelujah, amen.
and I know, like,
that's the core of the gospel.
right. And I know the Great Commission says go, but also go where? Depends on you. Like,
And that was
go.
specifically historically to certain peoples, to the disciples. And
Right.
yes, a lot of those things apply to us, but I think it bears looking at to say, who was this verse to?
right.
And then how does this apply to me? Because
Right.
not everything is directly related to, like, this is a specific call to every Christian everywhere.
Right.
Jesus was talking to his disciples, who at the time Christianity was not spread. It was not really common because
Right.
Jesus literally had just died and been
Right.
resurrected.
And while USA has missioned to, I think the last time I looked, it was like 88% of the world or 80% of the world. Like,
which is an insane number.
it's an insane number for being 200 years old.
Right. The United
Yeah,
States
like-
is young.
Right. Another thing is, if you say that your salvation is questioned because you're not missioning, then you're basically calling every Christian that they should be missionaries if they're a Christian. But that's the same idea as calling every Christian not Christians if they're not pastors. And
yeah, and if everyone were a pastor, who would learn?
Right? I love the idea of everybody having a church home, but if we had that many churches of single people...
I mean, in Springfield alone, we have over 300 in the city limits.
I think is a ridiculous amount, and I wish there was more unity. Like, that's my whole take, is I just want more unity.
Right. I feel like, as a little side note, it probably wouldn't sit with me so wrong if I found that more churches worked together on issues.
Right.
Like, because, like, community-centered stuff, like, several churches get together and they do this thing, but instead it's very divided, and I've only ever worked in one cross-church event in my life, and I've been in church since I was, like, a tiny little baby.
I've only heard of two churches ever working together in my whole life, and that was when I started ministry school, and that was so wild, and I was like, where is this? I want to see more of this! And I don't. But, like, that's another thing. Like, the idea of calling everybody Christian means that you're a missionary is also saying you're only a Christian if you're a pastor. And that is not true. Not everybody is called a pastor. Not everybody is called to be a missionary. Not everybody is called to... There's a reason why there's fivefold ministry, and that's one of them.
Yeah, and I think short-term missions have their place.
Yes.
And we'll talk about that,
later.
In another podcast, what the place is. But as far as a lot of the core reasonings for missions goes, I think some good reasons for going into missions include seeing your neighbor, whether it be here or overseas.
Putting a face to your neighbor.
Putting a face to the need.
Yeah.
Like,
because
knowing how to pray.
I'm tired of seeing the in the arms of an angel.
The ASPCA type commercials for real people.
The human version, because I'm tired of, when I think poverty, I think of that commercial of the starving African babies with bloated bellies and need for food and water and clothes. And then I just wish I could be there and go there and see for myself, like have an actual picture of somebody that I have met and their name and talk to them and see it for myself instead of this commercial that I feel like is just publicizing the need and kind of dehumanizing people.
Yeah, because you don't know their name. You don't know their backstory. You just know, quote unquote, what's wrong with them.
Which is...
I use that very lightly.
Right.
Because I don't, how I feel about people being projects. I've already mentioned that.
Right.
So,
I think it's really, like, for me, the reason I don't write off the Dominican Republic trip as, like, unhelpful, and I don't know if anybody actually, felt helped, is because, well, a lot of people did get saved on that trip, or a lot of people did... Like, there was a lot of miracles that happened. Like, we saw people's legs grow out. We saw people, like... do stuff that they, like, that old lady threaded a needle when she had tremors so bad that she couldn't do that before. Like, there's a lot of physical, needs.
A lot of people walk where they couldn't, like, run when they couldn't. There was a lot of physical ailments that was healed, and it was amazing. I loved that.
So, like, there was a big, like, I don't know, there was a lot of faith on that trip.
Yeah.
Because we were leaving.
Yes, and... yeah, because we were leaving, there was a lot of faith. Like, if this doesn't happen, I don't have to think about this ever again.
Yeah, we're just a little bit like...
and like, I wish we had more people that had more faith, like, on our teams in Romania, but...
Like, you're here for a week.
Yeah,
don't lose it.
Yeah, you're here for a week. You can't lose it.
So I think some things that we need to work on as far as reasonings for going into missions that would be good is we need to think of how we view poverty. Mm-hmm. And really deep dive how we view the materially poor and how we connect with them.
Right.
And then...
So, like, for example, going to the Dominican Republic and thinking of people, like, in Dominican Republic and the need for Dominican Republic, I feel like I'm more generous when talked about Dominican Republic because I imagine the women that have... scars all over them and they were so beautiful, but
they
were in motorcycle accidents, but they're gorgeous, and having that song "Scars Till You're Beautiful" song stuck in my head forever. And I think of, like, you know, the guy that was in a cast, that his foot was healed. And I think of the sheikhs and how his hands were healed. And I think of all of the people that just loved God and how wonderful they were.
Right. I think that's something I've run into more recently where it's like, it's not that people are necessarily, I'm going to say this, it's a little bit of a hot take. I don't
hot takes.
really believe that people are depraved, like in the way that we typically view non-Christians as depraved. I think that people reach out to God in the way that they know how, and that just because they don't know the character of Jesus doesn't mean that they're not reaching out to God.
Right.
And so
Well,
a lot of times when people get healed and you say, oh, it's Jesus, then that gives them like a face to the God that they are already trying to connect with.
yes.
And that's what gets them saved,
Exactly.
is that you told them who the healing came from. And they're like, okay, well, I already
Searching.
believe that something is out there.
Right.
And then you just give them a face and a name and a real
Like tangible evidence.
tangible evidence that
Right.
something exists and cares about them.
Yes, completely agree.
And that's really where I feel like the heart of evangelism is for me. That's how I feel like it is.
Is to give the opportunity by not just preaching,
Yeah.
but giving a relationship and giving a
And yes,
I hate the word demonstration, but kind of supplying the opportunity for God to work.
right.
There, I'll
And
word
yes,
it that way.
sin exists and it affects us all in very real ways, but I'm not sure that people are necessarily depraved in the way that we would like them to be in
Yes.
order for them to get saved.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Meeting people and then you realize that people are really similar to you and they have similar motivations and they're not
They're not
they're
just
not
an
all
evil
bitter
ball of
and
wow.
evil and it's not like some darkness that you need to come and cleanse. Like, it's not even about me.
Right, it's not a self-grandizing project of, look at me, I did this.
Yeah.
Yay!
It's you get
Like-
to introduce them to a new friend whose name is Jesus.
Right, and I'm very much like, I get like really proud, like not really prideful, but I'm like, oh, look at this thing that happened. I'm so proud of it. Like, not really proud because I did it, but proud of like, the
It
opportunity was provided and I was open to letting Holy Spirit move and it happened. Like,
So I'm glad that it happened. It's
So,
like
yeah.
a gratefulness.
yeah. And so
You
I'm
don't
like,
really
look at
have
the
the
thing.
word.
Yeah. And people will be like, that's prideful. And I'm like, no, but look at the thing.
No, I'm just really, really grateful that it happened, and I feel a sense of like personal commitment. Like I was committed to the call,
Right.
And I went and I obeyed, and then this happened because of my commitment,
Right.
and I'm really grateful for that. And I think proud is like, it's a feeling, but it's not necessarily like it almost feels like the wrong word, but we don't actually have another word for it.
Because English
It's like
has all of the words, but the right ones.
profound gratefulness on a level
Yes.
that feels personal because you did the obedience and the call and you let things happen.
Right. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so some closing thoughts of if you want to go on short-term missions trips, which I do recommend.
Yes.
Just get some training first. Read this book. It's great.
We totally still recommend short-term missions trips. Just, there are some things that we crisised about, and
Yeah.
you can do them at home.
Yeah. And you know, if you're questioning more, just message us. We
Yeah.
will gladly email you back. But so one, am I in good health?
That's really
Okay.
important. You need to be able to work really hard, run a mile, you know.
Let me say why I put this on here. I cannot consider myself in good health, quote unquote, because I don't work out. I don't have energy. I really need to change
You're
my
not
lifestyle.
necessarily fit.
I'm not fit, but also if you told me to walk a mile in the heat, I'm not going to pass out and die because of
You're physically capable.
I'm
of
physically
doing it.
capable of doing it. So for example,
Romania is so hot.
Romania-
There's no air conditioning.
Romania doesn't use air conditioning. And so therefore it's very, very warm.
I'm convinced that the only reason the church that we go to in Romania has air conditioning is because they had so many Western missionaries coming.
I will completely agree with that.
I'm thoroughly convinced.
I will completely agree. So the reason why I say this is we were on a trip and it coincided with another trip. So we were like helping that team prepare, like we prepared before they came.
Right.
And we were invited to join them if we felt like we should.
Which was really freeing.
It was great. Anyway, so I brought water cooling towels because I knew how hot it was. And I mean, not a lot of people know what those are.
They're like
That's
little
fair.
towels that hold moisture and
Right.
they cool you down.
Yeah, but they're wonderful, and I will always recommend them on a trip. And this girl went on a trip, and she had a medical condition where she couldn't sweat.
And so the heat really overheated her.
Yeah, and so I let her use my water cooling towel all week, which was totally fine. Like, I didn't mind it. But I was kind of questioning why she chose to come on the trip.
Specifically to Romania, where it's extremely hot, and it is noted
It is noted that
in the
there
trip
is
details that it is going to be like hot.
right, like it's going to be hot. There's no AC. That's not very common. Like it's noted, and I was questioning like, I don't know. Maybe I just assume people would know things, but if I had a medical condition that prevented me from sweating, I would definitely be looking up like some sort of cooling device, bring a fan or something. I've seen people have the fan mister things, and she didn't. And I kind of questioned.
Because you don't want to have a medical emergency in another country that
That you're supposed to be serving.
you're supposed to be serving.
Right. I've been on a trip with that organization, and so I knew what was on the packing list that they gave, which included dresses and skirts, because Romania church is traditional, and she did not bring dresses or skirts. She had pants.
Yeah, it's conservative.
And I asked, like, I actually did specifically ask if she had a skirt. And she said no, she did not pack one. And I was really confused because the packing list said explicitly,
Bring a skirt. This is a conservative country.
yeah, do not wear pants to church.
You just need to pack what's on the list if they tell you.
It was so weird. So another one was, am I willing to conform to the culture so I can be respectful? Okay, this thing,
It's hard for me.
there's definitely times where it's hard for me, but I've definitely met people that have wanted to come on a trip with me, and when I gave them advice, because I am part of the art world, and when I gave them advice as somebody a part of the art world, they completely just disregarded it as nothing.
Yeah, and it was like a specific instance that had to do with an art piece.
Right. And how upset the art world
Community would be about
Yeah.
it being defaced.
Yes. And so, and it's not like, oh, you need to listen to me. That was not how I was approaching it. It was kind of like,
Here's my expert opinion as someone who has a bachelor's degree in fine arts.
right, and so therefore you should listen to somebody with an expert opinion, and they just were like, I'll do whatever God says. And while I do feel like you should do what God says, I also feel like you should listen to the community, because sometimes what we view as what God says is twisted with our own identity. And while I do totally think that we should all be led and listen to God first and not somebody else, I also do know that our culture puts shaded lenses on what we hear.
Yeah.
And I think it is best to be fully aware of the various things and then make a decision. So I think, like, if somebody was to go on a trip with us, I would want to be able to know that if I told them, hey, this is not acceptable in this culture, they would not just be like, okay, but God told me anyway, and went and did it. Because I think that is more traumatizing for the culture itself, like for the people and the culture.
Yeah, you can't just like shock people into
Yeah, you can't shock people into
changing.
which is the whole reason why I felt like God told me Romania and I need to get used to each other.
Right.
You have to, this is not a cannonball into a pool. This is a tip your toes in.
Yeah, it's like
It's a
a
slow,
zero entry situation.
yeah, it's a slow gaze.
And I think that God speaks to us through other people.
I do too. And so we have to listen to the community as well. So that was another thing, because that's what was brought up
Right.
and bothers me. But there's
So, like,
times
skirts, headscarves. I've worn those.
Yeah, I've worn those. We've
And I
seen
mean-
people be so respectful to the culture that they didn't have a headscarf, so they used a t-shirt. Like,
Right.
while they low-key looked a little funny, I was grateful that they were, like, willing to be that humble
And I
to
think,
put a t-shirt on their head. Like,
and people from the community notice how you're trying to be respectful. For example, you have a really great story about when we were in Greece and we had come from Macedonia, and you were talking to our banking lady.
oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, so another good story is, for example,
About being respectful to
about
the
being
culture.
respectful to the culture. So another good example is Greece has this whole thing about the term Macedonia.
Yeah, it's like a long feud.
Long feud. Not getting into politics here because whatever.
I don't understand it, honestly.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to understand. But more or less, Greece hates that the country Macedonia, which is now like
It's called the
Northern Republic of Macedonia or something. It's very long now.
Of North Macedonia.
Yeah, so they just don't like that it's called Macedonia because they feel like they should be also Macedonia along with Greece. It's confusing. Anyway, the point is, don't call Macedonia Macedonia, call it Skopje when referring to that in Greece. And I went to exchange funds in Greece, and she asked where I came from, and I said, oh, I came from Macedonia. And then I said, oh, I'm so sorry, I came from Skopje, which didn't bother me as much because I actually did come from Skopje, the city.
Yeah, we came.
Macedonia.
Yeah, we came from like actually Skopje.
Yeah.
Skopje,
So like,
it was fine.
she first gave me
Like,
she gave me the dead eye, the stank
daggers.
eye, the daggers. She gave me daggers when I said Macedonia.
mugged you so hard.
Yeah, and so I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I mean, I came from Skopje," and she said, "Wow, thank you." Like she was so grateful that I tried. So like, even if you do slip up, correct yourself. You know, if you can. I definitely struggle with sometimes being respectful to the culture because I'm the person that will sit on the floor and Romanians are like, no, it's dirty, don't do that.
Yeah,
And I'm like, but I sit.
but I want to sit down.
But it's stuff that like, you know, we're always trying, as long as our heart is, we're trying, you know.
Right.
It doesn't
honestly,
matter.
It keeps going back to humility.
Right, it goes back to humility. It doesn't matter if you slip up. If you slip up, that's fine. We've all slipped up. As long as you have the humility. Next one is, do I want to go because it will be a good experience for me? Because if it's about what you want, then please just stay home. Or until, like, you get your priorities straightened out.
Yeah.
Make sure it's for the other person.
Yeah.
And that's something...
Ask God to open your eyes and, you know,
Right.
see what he sees and ask for empathy. Because the Bible says that if you ask for things, then he will give it to you.
Right. And so that's still something that I struggle with. Like, people ask me why I want to move to Romania, and I always say, because it feels like home. And that's true. It does. I think I might say that because it's the easiest answer, because I've definitely gotten a lot of smirks of like, oh, you just want to love people, huh? That's weird. You know?
Yeah, it's the best one to say to people who don't really understand missions
Yeah.
or have an idea in their brain about missions that is not what we do
Right.
specifically. And so it's a lot easier to give a personal reason for moving
That's true.
than it is to give a personal, so like for the moving thing, it's easier to give a personal reason because people are like, why would you uproot your entire life, leave your culture, leave your family, leave your mother tongue? And I think the reason that you can give the masses is it feels like home.
Right.
But when it comes to short-term missions, that's like a 2-week trip, and I think
That's true. That is kind of
it's
different.
the reasonings for short-term missions are really different than long-term missions.
Like, why are you missioning to Romania for 2 weeks?
Because it was on sale.
Because it was on sale. Look, a sale.
Yeah, so
Because I saw a picture of a Roma and decided that I wanted to see their culture and to love the one in front of me. Like, wanted to make sure that that person was okay.
And honestly,
to put
I
a
think
face.
that seeing someone from a different culture and thinking, wow, that looks really neat, I want to go and understand, I think that's a pretty good reason.
I feel like that's not so self-centric. I feel like that's... And I feel that way with a lot of cultures of like, wow, that I want to understand just a little bit. I know cultures are like icebergs, 90% in the ocean, but I just want to understand what I can.
Want to just look
Yeah.
and see.
I look and have the humility to be taught.
Listen to your orientation. Be cautious of cultural norms. Beware of dogs.
And yes. And if there's not an orientation, I did this with Dominican Republic because we didn't really have one. And I asked for one. I asked, like, what are cultural faux pas that I am not meant to do or that I should do, etc. Because I did not want to walk in and do something offensive and offend the people I'm trying to serve. Because that is contradicting what we're supposed to be doing.
Or even things that aren't offensive. They're just
Look down
embarrassing.
On you. Like eating chicken with your fingers in France. I did that because it was a chicken leg. But yeah, you eat a chicken leg with a knife in France, and that's hard.
I feel like France is one of those places where you're never going to learn all the faux pas.
Basically, there's too
Isn't
many.
that where faux pas comes from, is France?
Yes.
So that's our little deep dive into reasonings about missions and internal motivation and plenty of other stuff.
Yeah, so we hope you enjoyed the podcast. We're going to do like these blessing things because I think they're really important.
All right.
So, dear Jesus, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak and listen. Thank you for granting all of us the beautiful dignity of being able to ask questions. God, I ask that if anybody feels called to short-term missions, that you work on all of our hearts, and you work on our hearts towards missions, and that you give us the right resources and training and responsibilities that we need to be better prepared to love your bride, and that we can love the person in front of us. Give us a deeper heart for empathy and a deeper heart for compassion, just like Jesus showed. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
The Nation's Call is a 501c3 missions organization supported by wonderful people like you. If you would like to partner with us, you can do so by going to Patreon at patreon.com/thenationscall and by following us on Instagram and Facebook, where you can also ask us questions we might address here. Thanks for listening to the Nation's Call podcast.